Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. We're very glad that you could join us. My name is Billy Carson. I'm with University Conference Services, and before we get started, I'd like to give you some general information about this afternoon's presentation. First, we have a large audience, so we won't be able to open the phone lines for your questions, but you can type them in the questions pane, which is on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Your questions are all private, so please feel free to ask away. No one else can see them. Our speaker will answer as many questions as time permits at the conclusion of his presentation. Next, if you're listening to the broadcast over your computer and you're having difficulty hearing, dial into the number listed in the audio pane in your control panel. We've also sent that number out via chat, so you can find it there. Finally, we're recording this broadcast, and we'll make the link available via email together with information that I know many of you want on HRCI recertification credit. You'll also receive a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, today's topic, best practices for conducting an advisor request for proposal, is an issue that is increasingly important for everyone on your investment and retirement plan committee. While most people are familiar with conducting an RFP for a plan provider, very few actually do so for an advisor, even though it is arguably as much a part of due diligence as anything else a plan sponsor does. Fortunately, we have a speaker with in-depth first-hand knowledge of why and how to conduct an advisor RFP. Greg Middleton is a senior manager at CapTrust Financial Advisors, where he's responsible for business development and special project support for all of the firm's financial advisors. Previously, he worked in the marketing department, where he was responsible for developing and supporting the CapTrust brand, and that included creating and implementing strategic marketing programs and overseeing the creative development of all marketing collateral and media. Greg is a member of the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, the Society for Human Resource Management, and the American Marketing Association. He's earned certification as an accredited retirement plan specialist through SPARK. That's the Society of Professional Asset Managers and Record Keepers. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that organization. Greg earned a BS in Business Administration with a concentration in marketing from East Carolina University. And I can add that Greg has also been a speaker for us at our conferences, most recently in Las Vegas in September. And now I am going to turn things over to Greg. Greg, I am going to change presenters here in a second and give you control, and you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Billy, how does that look?
Looks great.
Okay. Billy, thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon and welcome. As Billy mentioned, my name is Greg Middleton with CapTrust Financial Advisors. CapTrust is a national retirement and investment advisory firm headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, with over 1,000 retirement plan clients and in excess of $100 billion in assets under advisement. The purpose of today's discussion is to walk through a step-by-step process on how to conduct an advisor request for proposal and share some best practices that we have learned based on our experience. As Billy mentioned, my role at CapTrust is to support our firm's business development efforts, and one of those primary functions is responding to advisor requests for proposals. As a firm, we have responded to over 700 RFPs over the last 10 years from a multitude of organizations ranging from startups, nonprofits, government entities, public and private corporations, higher education institutions, and Fortune 500 companies for their defined contribution, defined benefit, non-qualified retirement plans, in addition to corporate cash, operating funds, and foundations and endowments in either a single or multiple plan format, with assets ranging from less than $1 million to over $6 billion. Before we get started, I would like to understand the audience's experience with advisor requests for proposals. Billy has created a quick poll that we would like for you to respond to.
Okay, and the poll is now open. Okay, let's close the polling. And we have 31%, it's actually about a third. 31% have no experience with conducting an advisor RFP. 38% have previously conducted one, and 31% plan to conduct one within the next 12 months.
Okay.
So with
Great.
that, I will turn things, whoops, I'm sharing things that I shouldn't. Let me hide that, and you can have the controls back, Greg.
Okay. Thanks, Billy. It's good for us just to get a good understanding. That's about the normal that the normal trend that we see in the industry is about even in terms of experience for advisor RFPs. Over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to focus on these two simple topics. First, we're going to discuss the activity, trends, and benefits that are associated with advisor RFPs and why there's been such an increase in advisor RFP activity in the retirement plan industry, and why plan sponsors should proceed with the process. The other thing that we're going to focus on today is we're going to provide attendees a step-by-step process to ensure a sound advisor request for proposal process. What we'll do is we'll walk through and explain the major components of an advisor RFP and provide a simple 10-step checklist that will make your process more efficient and easier to manage. For the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to assume that each of your organizations have made the decision to proceed with some type of advisor RFP. I know there are internal discussions about whether organizations should move forward with an RFP or hire an advisor, but again, for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to assume that that decision has already been made. Okay. There are four main reasons why plan sponsors are conducting advisor RFPs. First is changes in their retirement plan. These changes can be attributed to a number of factors, such as overall growth of the plan, or if your organization has completed a merger or recent acquisition. Next, as many of you know, increased complexity of fiduciary responsibility. A plan sponsor's role as a fiduciary continues to grow annually in addition to complying with ERISA guidelines and DOL regulations. Some organizations may feel they are well equipped to handle those responsibilities, but most do not. Next, general due diligence, fee and service validation, and a general understanding of the market. For many retirement plans, the overall structure and size of their retirement plan has not changed, but they may have been with the same retirement plan advisor for more than 5 to 7 years. Many of you recently received your 408B2 notices last year, but how many of you know if the number you're paying for advisory services is in line with the industry? With the increased activity in lawsuits and some of the recent verdicts going in favor of the plaintiffs, it's always good from a fiduciary perspective to understand the market and make sure your plan is in line. Finally, the need for a formal process. Let's say you do have an advisor that has provided good service to your plan and your participants for a long time for a fair fee. If you were audited by the DOL next week, could you present to them a documented process on how or why you chose that advisor? Benefits of conducting advisor RFPs. Here's a list of top benefits plan sponsors achieve by conducting an advisor RFP. First, it creates the opportunity to align retirement plan goals with the advisory services and business models available. This is good because two components can change. First, your organization takes a different approach with respect to the goals of the retirement plan. Or second, services within the industry have evolved and there could be a better option available. Fiduciary risk mitigation, because the search demonstrates the application of a deliberate process. You have a process and you followed it. Next, a better understanding of fees for services. This process creates an awareness of different service offerings, such as provider RFPs, fiduciary training, participant advice, 338 or discretion, or target date fund searches, to name a few, and whether they are delivered in an a la carte fashion or as part of an all-in-one solution, and what is the associated pricing. Next is the detection of trends. Based on the responses that you would receive from advisory firms, you will get a better understanding of the industry or market and what other advisory firms are capable of offering, and also what they feel are important issues that plan sponsors should be addressing. Next, benchmarking information. As we just mentioned, You have your number, you know the fees that you're paying for your services, but through this process you'll know if your number is fair and if it's in line with the industry. The final benefit is an inherent fairness of process. Shockingly, there are some advisors that are in place because they play golf with the owner or they're a buddy of the CFO. But going through this process demonstrates the fairness and due diligence of your decision. Next slide we would like to focus on is terminology. Our industry has a ton of jargon, and we really like our acronyms too. This is a list of commonly used terms associated with the process. Request for information, or an RFI, request for qualifications, RFQ, a due diligence questionnaire, which is a DDQ, request for advisor, an RFA, or request for proposal, an RFP. The primary takeaway that we want you all to have from this list is this list helps you kind of screen different candidates to find more suitable candidates or the most appropriate candidates that meet your qualifications to receive a full RFP through. As you do either an RFI or an RFQ, what you're doing is you're understanding general basic fundamentals of different organizations, and from that it will allow you to screen out certain companies that probably aren't good fits for you. So that way when you do get to a full RFA or an RFP, you have specific candidates that are giving you the full responses that you're looking for, because you don't want to sift through 15 responses and 6 of those responses be candidates that are not good fits in the first place. So when you hear RFP, these are the general terms that people use. Again, the first 3 are just a general understanding of the company and asking some basic questions so you can identify your final list of candidates to send the RFP through to, and then the final 2 is the actual RFP. Okay. The other takeaway is as you move down this list, the complexity of questions and your documents will increase as you move from doing an RFI all the way to an RFP. So again, the takeaway that we want you guys to have as you sit through the webinar today is what we've done is we've created a 10-step checklist that will ensure a well thought out and efficient advisor RFP process for any organization. And those 10 steps are step 1, determining the purpose and key stakeholders. Step 2, gathering content and retirement plan information. Step 3, building your deliverable. Step 4, identifying the recipients that you'll send the RFP to. Step 5, determine the response structure and distribute your RFP. Step 6, go through an intent to bid and Q&A period. Step 7, review the responses and as an organization determine the finalist. Step 8, conduct your finals presentations. Step 9, make a decision. And step 10, document your process. Again, this is what we feel, and based on our experience, this is a sound 10-step checklist that as you work through it will create an efficient process and give your organization the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. Again, we'll walk through each step in greater detail. Step 1, determining the purpose and key stakeholders. First step is who needs to be involved. Depending on the size of your organization, you may be the entire HR department, you may be the entire investment committee, or you'll need to determine if there are others that need to be involved. Other people that could be involved in this process would be your procurement department, representative from legal or finance, CFO or CEO, or the investment or benefits committee. Based on our experience, we've seen some RFPs get 2/3 of the way through the process, and then someone get involved and want to take it in a different direction, and it adds 3 or 4 months to the process. So a good first step is try to figure out who all the appropriate people in your organization are that need to be involved in this process and get them involved early. Next step, determine who's in charge and who's the primary contact. So for all the people that are involved, you need to determine everyone's role and what input they have with the process. Things like who's going to be involved with the creation of the RFP, who's going to review the responses from the candidates, and who's going to be involved in making a decision. The other key takeaway is you need to determine who is in charge as the project manager and who the primary contact will be for all the respondents. It can be two different people, but know that it is a major responsibility. So again, you want to get those addressed early. Next step you want to focus on is identifying the needs of your organization and the goal of this process. This sounds pretty simple, but this is probably the most important aspect of the RFP process. If you can correctly agree on the purpose for this process, you will achieve a better outcome. Some specific things to consider are you doing this RFP strictly for a benchmarking exercise or due diligence? The services that you're asking for, do you want them in a project or do you want them in an ongoing capacity? And if it is ongoing, do you want the services delivered to you in a traditional 321 fiduciary role or 338 fiduciary role? And for those of you that are not familiar with the 338 term, that is a term for full discretion where the investment committee or the plan sponsor turns over all decision-making to the retirement plan advisor. Again, it's a growing trend in the industry, but it's something as an organization you need to talk about. Two other points to think about is if you have multiple plans, do you want to hire one advisor for all of them, or do you want to hire multiple advisors for your multiple plans? And finally, determine what's most important to your organization, what your goal is, what are you trying to achieve by doing this process. Next step you need to focus on is choose a review and a scoring process. Once you have received responses, you have to determine what criteria is most important to your organization, how you will review and evaluate them, and narrow your list of finalists. You can achieve this either by assigning entire responses to each member of the group or assigning specific sections from each response to certain members. You can discuss your results either in a quantitative or qualitative format. Some organizations use a scoring system to spreadsheet the respondents. If this is something you're interested in, please email me afterwards and I can send you a sample. This is another very important part of the process because, unfortunately, when all the responses come in, the organizations they underestimate the amount of paper that comes in, and it takes a long time to sort through it. So if you have a specific methodology for your review process and your scoring process, it makes it a lot easier to work through that. Next, you want to agree on a timeline. This is not only for the external responses, but also internally how long it will take your organization to complete the steps you need to identify your choice and when you would like them to begin work. Based on our experience, a majority of advisor RFP processes do not stay on track due to an underestimation of how long this process will take, primarily the review process. And finally, come to a consensus. After you've gone through these steps, make sure you review the decisions, responsibilities, and time frame with all involved parties associated to ensure agreement. Next step you want to focus on is gathering content and plan information for your RFP document. For the purpose of today's webinar, instead of giving you a list of 100 questions to include for any RFP, we wanted to discuss the main categories of information you should be asking about retirement plan advisory firms. But before we review that list, the most crucial point to stress is to make sure the questions you ask match the services you are requesting. I know it sounds simple, but we've seen, unfortunately, sometimes when RFPs come in for a 401k plan, it's got foundation and endowment questions, questions for pensions, and the reason for that is people just go to Google and look up advisor RFP, and they just grab the first template that they're looking for. So that creates a lot of challenges and slows down the process. So again, you want to make sure that you're asking the correct questions for the audience or for the plan that you need support for. We'll go through a list of suggested categories. The first category is just general overview of the firm. Basic information that you want to understand is organization and firm information, things about how they're organized, their staff, where they're located, what their history is. And the other focus you want to understand is their business activities. You want to understand if retirement plan advisory services is their main focus, if it's one of a number of businesses, or how all those businesses are associated. Next area you want to focus on is their client experience. You want to understand general information about their current clients, and you also want to ask for specific references that you can call as part of the process. Another good component or data point to look at is you want to ask for what their experience is with plans like yours. It's always good to work with a firm that has experience with maybe specific plan size, maybe your provider, maybe your industry, maybe your location, because those types of firms have a better understanding about the issues that are specific to your organization and your industry and can do a good job helping you optimize service offerings that are in the industry. The other thing you want to understand is what their service model is and how they're staffed for that and how they would work with you on an ongoing basis. Next area you want to focus on is legal. Specific areas that you want to address is how they approach compliance, how they deal with risk management, what their E&O insurance is, what their liability is, and if they've had any recent litigation and how they've addressed that. The other thing you want to do from a fiduciary is understand any potential or current conflicts of interest, either through relationships or compensation. Next big section is fiduciary status and support. What you want to understand or ask for in this section is understand what type of fiduciary they can be. Can they be a fiduciary? And if so, do they acknowledge it in their contract? In addition to that, you want to understand what resources or training or different technology they can offer you to support you in your role as a fiduciary. Next section would be investment consulting services. This is primarily you want to understand how they approach investments. You want to understand their opinion and experience with investment policy statements. If they have a DB plan, or if you have a DB plan, you want to understand how they focus on asset allocation and asset liability modeling, and also their capital market assumptions. That will give you a good indication about how they view the economy and the markets. You also want to understand how they interact and how they work with investment managers and what their search and selection and also due diligence process is. And finally, you want to understand how they report performance analysis and how often and how timely they get that information to you about your investment managers. You also want to understand what additional education and training they'll offer to the committee or the trustee. You want to understand if they have fiduciary training or if they have just general investment training and education to make sure that the investment committee is apprised of all the things that are most important in the industry and that they know how to fully execute their duties. Another important area to focus on is provider experience. Specifically, you want to understand what their experience is in the industry and also how many different providers they work with and how many different providers they actually choose or recommend to their clients and how they interact with them. So you want to understand if they specifically work a lot with your current provider, if they work with other providers, and how they're able to benchmark those providers and make good recommendations to clients. The other thing you want to understand is if you needed to do a search and selection and make a change, how they can do that and what their experience has been and what outcomes they've achieved for their clients. Next would be plan participant services. You want to focus on what type of education and advice services they can offer your employees and also what type of education or financial planning they can offer your highly compensated employees as well. This may not be applicable to some, but you also want to understand if you have a non-qualified plan or other non-retirement, non-defined contribution, defined benefit plans, how they can support and what service offerings they can offer for that. Next, you want to understand how they can address technology. You want to understand what their current resources and support are. So in the event that there's an issue with clients accessing their information or how their data is secured, or if there's an issue with their continuity plan is, it's always good just to get background so as a fiduciary you're making a good decision. And finally, you want to understand what their final proposal is. You want to get clarity on what specific services they're presenting and what fees are associated with that service. The other component, we'll talk about this a little bit later, a trend that we've seen in the industry over the last 2 years is as part of the RFP process, plan sponsors are including a copy of their final contract as part of the RFP, and what they're doing is they're asking respondents to review the contract and provide any red line edits or changes they have with the contract back as part of their RFP response. And what this does is, in the event that respondent is chosen as a finalist and ultimately hired, it helps speed up the negotiation process and helps get the advisor in place sooner rather than going back and forth with all the contract challenges at the end. So it's a pretty new concept that's been in the industry. It's evolving, and it actually has been very helpful and saves a lot of time. Okay, so now that we've focused on the specific categories of content that you should be asking about retirement plan advisors, we want to focus on specific retirement plan information. So in addition to including specific questions, you also want to make sure you include specific information about your plan. You can do it in one of two ways. You could include the following documents as attachments, or you can pull out specific data points and incorporate them into the background portion of your RFP. The benefit to including specific plan information or these documents is that you get a more comprehensive response back from the responding firms. What they can do is, if they have a better understanding of your plan, they can identify areas of improvement, maybe things that you haven't thought about. So again, it helps identify consulting firms that have a good understanding and can be an advocate for your plan. I know that those are that was a lot of information, a lot of questions to go through. The Department of Labor and other industry associations have put out specific general industry templates for retirement plan advisor RFPs. If you would like a link to those or a copy of those templates, please email me, and I'll be more than happy to send those. And those will have the specific questions in the organization of those questions of the categories that we just talked through. Okay, so now that we've talked through all the different content and the different retirement plan information to include in your RFP, the next thing we want to focus on is step 3, and that's actually building your deliverable. So now let's talk through how to organize it. First section will be the introduction. What would be included in this section would be a general overview of your company and a background of your retirement plan. So general things about history about your company and about your retirement plan. You don't want to go into too much detail, but you want to provide a good overview. The other thing that you want to do is provide a general purpose and scope about why you're conducting this process and what you're looking for. In this section, it is good to let the respondents know kind of what your intent is, whether or not this is just purely a benchmarking exercise, whether or not it's a full, you are looking to replace your current advisor, or if the current advisor is being included in the process. So again, it's good just to state your specific purpose on why you're doing this. Next section, general RFP instructions and information. Specific information included here is your RFP schedule and timeline. Now what this timeline should include would be the specific dates about when the RFP is released, when specific deadlines are, things like when questions are due back for clarification, when responses are due, when you should make a decision, when finals presentation should be scheduled, and when you want to hopefully proceed with a new advisor. It's good to have a full schedule and timeline in the RFP. That way it keeps everybody on track. Next thing you want to include in here is who the primary contact is for the RFP. All the respondents will have questions, and there needs to be a specific point person that all that information flows through, and this is where their information would be. The final thing in this section would be RFP response requirements. This discusses the parameters of how you want the response delivered, how you want the response back. We have another slide later that will go through that in full detail, but this will be things about specifically how long you want it to be, if you want it in a specific font type, the size, if you want electronic or hard copy, but again, we'll address that later. Section 3, overview and requirements. This is where you'll include detailed information about your different retirement plans and the specific scope of services that you're requesting. So it's not just that you're looking for an advisor, but you specifically list out what you're looking for that advisor to do. Next is purpose and requirements. So again, this is a focus on what you want the advisor to do and what you're asking them to do. Minimum respondent qualifications. So as part of screening for good candidates and finding firms that are compatible, you want to maybe list out specific minimum qualifications for responding firms, things like experience in the industry, number of assets, number of clients, number of clients in an industry, or a specific plan type or plan size. If you provide some minimum qualifications, again, it kind of weeds out firms that may not be the best fit for you. Next, you want to list out the performance, specifically how you want the advisor to perform, what you're looking for from them, and then specifically reporting how you want them to report on how the relationship is going and how you'll evaluate their work. Next section will be section 4. These are the questions, again, that we just addressed a few slides ago. This is where your specific questions will go. And then section 5 will be all your supporting materials, things like the contract or your IPS or a sample quarterly review. Okay, so now that we've kind of gotten our questions, gotten our retirement plan information, and we've gotten a structure for the advisor RFP, the next thing you have to focus on is identifying recipients. Before you identify recipients to send this to, you have to really address 2 basic questions. First is, what's an appropriate number of retirement plan advisors to send this to? On average, most plan sponsors include 6 to 10, but don't let it get too high because you still have to review all of the responses. The other question you want to address is whether or not you include the incumbent. And again, the incumbent should be made aware of the process and what your intention is, whether or not to include them or not include them. Next thing you want to focus on is trying to come up with your list. You need specific sources to get a good list of candidates to send this to. The first source will be key stakeholders. So for all the people internally that are involved in this process, maybe your CFO, maybe other people in the investment committee who have worked at other organizations, they may have experience with other advisors and can recommend 1 or 2 quality organizations to include. Next, there are 2 industry publications that generate an annual list that provide a good list of industry or of industry list of consultants. Plan Sponsor Magazine and Pensions and Investments, their list pulls together specific retirement plan consultants and all of their supporting information, things like number of plans they have or services they can offer. So again, that's another good resource to pull prospective respondents from. Next, you want to talk to your current service providers. So it could be your retirement plan provider, your risk attorney. Reach out to them and ask them if they have a couple of retirement plan advisors that they would recommend to you. The good thing is they'll probably have 2 or 3 right off the bat that they feel will be a good fit for you. Next, you want to talk to your peers. You may want to talk to people in your profession. So if there are professional organizations that you're a member of, ask those members who they work with or who they would recommend, and they would give you a couple names. The other group you want to talk to is talk to your industry peers. They probably work with other firms and have had a similar experience or maybe have similar goals that you do for your plan. So talk to them and ask them who they would recommend. And finally, third-party consultants. You can outsource this entire process to third-party consultants, and those can range from other advisory firms to risk attorneys, benefit brokers, or groups that only focus on conducting advisor RFPs for plan sponsors. If you do it, make sure you understand their experience first. You want to understand how often they do this and how many have they done for a retirement plan specific to yours. As a firm, we've interacted with over 40 different groups that have run advisor RFPs on behalf of plan sponsors. If you would like a list, please email me afterwards and I can send you a list of people that you can reach out to that you can either outsource this whole process to, or they can give you some recommendations about firms to include. Okay, next step. So you put your information together. You know who you're going to send it to. What you want to address next is how you want your response to come back to you. First thing you want to consider is if your response needs to include a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality clause. You want to make sure that's included and that the proper paperwork is returned. Next thing you want to focus on, again, thinking about the process. You think your job's done because you put your deliverable together and you've sent everything out. But once you get things back, it is a very daunting task to get 6 to 10 responses of probably 100 pages each. And what want to do is not get overwhelmed with that. So again, providing structure for how you want things to come back will help save you time in the process. Again, having a big response, you may want to ask for a cover letter or an executive summary. So state that in how you want the response returned to you if you require a cover letter or an executive summary. Again, as we mentioned before, some organizations have a procurement department that has to be involved in all buying and selling decisions. If that's the case for your company, reach out to them and understand what forms have to be involved and make sure that they're included correctly and that the instructions are very clear on how to complete them and get them back. Next, you want to, as an organization, understand or make the decision whether or not you want a hard copy response or if you want electronic response only or if you want both. Depending on your method for documentation or storing, you may want hard copies, or for efficiency, if you have a large committee that needs to be involved, it would be better to get an electronic copy of all responses. So make sure you state that. Next to be content limitations. Some plan sponsors want to limit the amount of information they're getting back. So to do that, they have a specific page limit for the overall response. It can't exceed 50 pages or some other number. And they also have specific word counts for each response. They say that each response should be less than 300 words or be very concise. So again, it's important to communicate this information in the original document. Next would be a third-party service. So instead of your primary point of contact being the person to communicate all the information out and get all the responses back, there are electronic procurement services out there that you can upload all this information to, and that service will communicate the entire RFP out to all the respondents, and the respondents have to respond to that service, and then the primary contact person gets all the information fed to them. So it's almost like it's an outsourced person for the process, and we see it occasionally, and it's helpful for some plan advisors or plan sponsors. Next to be packaging. Some plan sponsors have a specific way they want information sent back. So again, if it's hard copy, some plan sponsors may want everything in a 3-ring binder. Some may want it in a folder. Some may want it 2-sided, stapled, paper clipped. Just work through that and make sure you communicate that in your RFP document. Next to be pricing. As people are reviewing the RFP, you don't want pricing to be the main driver of why you choose an organization to be a finalist. So some groups take the pricing and have it as a separate deliverable in a folder or a sealed envelope that is reviewed after the fact. So that may be another consideration to think about. Next, again, as we talked about earlier, a lot of plan sponsors are having the contracts evaluated and redlined early. Make sure you communicate how you want those feedback, how you want those edits and feedback sent back to you. And finally, samples or marketing materials. All advisory firms are very excited when they get an RFP. They're excited for the opportunity to demonstrate what they can do and what their capabilities are. And in addition to answering the RFP, they also include a variety of samples to demonstrate their work. So again, it can be overwhelming if they include 5 to 15 different samples in addition to the response and cover letter. So make sure you clarify whether or not you want samples included with the response. So again, these are all different issues to consider. So that way when you get your document back or you get your response back, you have a good expectation about what you're going to get, and it, again, it keeps your process moving more efficiently. The next step will be step 6. So you've sent your RFP out. All respondents have received it. What you want to do is establish a deadline for an intent to bid. You want to have a hard deadline for firms acknowledging that they received it and that they will respond to the RFP. So that way you can get a good number to focus on for people that are wanting to be involved in this process. As they go through the RFP, some firms may have questions to clarify different issues or want better understanding about the retirement plan or the process. As you get those questions in, set a deadline for those questions, and as you get them in, what you want to do is, regardless of who sent the questions to you, you want to take all the questions and answer them in one document, and then you want to distribute it back out to all the respondents that are intending to bid. So that way all the information is above board and everybody's been communicated to effectively. Okay, step 7, your deadline is hit. All your responses have been received, your first step is once you get the responses in, acknowledge to respondents that you received their response and that you're reviewing. Again, there are a lot of organizations and firms that are very excited to have the opportunity to present for a new piece of business, and we're on pins and needles just to make sure that you all have received it. There's some that we haven't heard back for a week or so that they've even gotten it, so it's always just a best practice to let them know that their hard work's been acknowledged and that you have received it, and you'll get back to them at a later date. Next thing you want to do is try not to get overwhelmed. Again, you'll get a fair amount of information back. Once you get everything in, try to stick to your predetermined process and give yourself enough time to review the information and make the best evaluation possible. As you're going through the different responses, it's okay to go back to certain respondents and ask follow-up questions. There may be areas that you need clarification on, or there may be questions that you don't think maybe they answered in the right way. So it's never a problem just to go back. You don't have to go through a formal process. You can just email them the question directly and give them a 1 or 2 day deadline to get that back to you. Finally, communicate internally. So as you go through your review process, make sure you all are working together and you all are talking. And once you all have gone through that process, try to come to a decision quickly. That, again, helps the process move along a lot faster. Next step, step 8. So when you have determined your list of finalists, you want to communicate to those that were selected and those that were not. A lot of the firms that were not selected will want to know why they weren't selected or what they could do better next time. So maybe to preempt that is in your response to those that did not get selected, let them know that once the process is over, you will be open to providing feedback, but you can't provide feedback while the process is going on. That will save you all time to focus on the candidates that you've identified to be potentially the best fit, and you can set time aside for those other firms after the fact. Next thing you want to focus on is reviewing schedules for key decision makers for availability. So internally, could be anywhere from 3 to 5 people that need to be involved in that final presentation, that final decision. Make sure you look at all their calendars and all their schedules and see what days are available for each of them that overlap, that are good days for candidates to come in. So once you identify those days, ask those individuals to block that time off for finals presentations. And then once you've got those dates, then go back to your finalist firms. Most, a good number of finalists to bring in is between 2 and 4. So what you want to do is bring those dates back to those 2 to 4 groups and say these are the dates, and you want to coordinate and schedule the presentations with those finalists. Okay, final steps 9 and 10, conducting finals, and documenting. For the finals presentation, this has already been probably a 4 to 6 week process where you all have understood and read a lot of information about your finalists. What you want to do is for this final presentation, you want to communicate specific expectations, topics to address, the agenda, and timing for the finalists. So you want to communicate back to them, these are the 5 things that we want to talk about. It'll be 45 minutes for Q&A, 45 minutes for presentation to hear the people that will be there. So again, you've kind of looked at the industry, you filtered the list down to a list of 2 to 4 quality candidates, and there are probably specific things you want them prepared to address, and it's good to let them know that ahead of time so they can come in and make best use of everybody's time. The other thing that you would want to do is you want to get a good understanding of what it's like to actually work with a group and not just have them present to you. And the way to do that is provide a real-time issue about your retirement plan that you are considering or struggling or thinking about, and ask them how they would respond to it. And by doing that, that gives you a real-world example of what it would be like to work with them and what that fit is like. If it's a good fit, if it's not so good fit, what the personalities are like. And again, it's a good indicator about what it's like to work with a firm as opposed to presenting their services. Next thing you want to do is check references. As part of the RFP, hopefully you ask for some references that you could contact. Fortunately, some plan sponsors kind of leave this part out. You can learn a lot about an organization by calling these references and getting a better understanding about what it's like to work with them. If it comes down to, it's 2 candidates that you can't really, they both look the same, they're both priced about the same, they all present the same. Another thing you may want to do is conduct a site visit. You may want to go to their headquarters or their office and get a sense of what it's like to see all the resources and support that would be working for you. So again, I would say it's important to do if it's a tiebreaker and you really are struggling with which decision to make. And once you've done all that, make a decision. Just go through and get a consensus and make your decision and move forward. And once you've made your decision, document your process and your decision. So in summary, going through this 10-step process, as a fiduciary, you will have a documented process that is well thought out and thorough. And this exercise will either reinforce your previous decision or it will partner you with a retirement plan advisor that is best suited for your company's goals, needs, and objectives for its retirement plan. Billy said to try to leave about 10 minutes for questions, so I see it's probably 2:50, so hopefully we've done that, and I'll turn it back over to Billy to open up for questions for the audience.
Thanks very much, Greg. That was very thorough, a lot of information, and it's pretty clear that you have a very well-organized approach to conducting an advisor RFP. One of the things that you mentioned that I think is probably a little outside of what I would have anticipated was your suggestion that the plan sponsor create a contract to provide for finalists. And who in the firm would be the best person to create that that contract? Do you need to have an attorney involved at that point?
So I guess to clarify, when if there's a services agreement that any of I guess any organization has when they work with a third party, it's their standard contract, and what they do, it's either legal or finance has that contract, and they just include it with the RFP. So it's not a new contract that's created, it's the terms of the agreement, and it's just their blank contract that they send with the RFP.
Okay. Thanks very much. And I think you have probably covered this one before, but I'll ask it anyway since it was asked. From start to finish, how much time should a plan sponsor allow for this whole process?
It depends on when they want an advisor in place. So if they need if it's a year-end goal and they need to have someone in place, let's say by December 31st, most firms, depending on the complexity of the RFP, it takes firms roughly 2 to 4 weeks to put an advisor RFP response together, and it will probably take 2 to 3 weeks for the plan sponsor to review all the responses, and then probably another 2 weeks for finals presentations and then making a decision. So normally what we've seen from start to finish is anywhere from 3 to 4 months. We've seen it sometimes as short as 6 weeks, but that's a fast track where there's some sort of issue driving the decision. But typically this process can last anywhere from 3 to 6 months.
Okay, that can be a pretty time-consuming thing then. One other question. I know that firms typically, or it's advocated that firms do an RFI strictly for their provider on a couple of year basis. Is that something that you would recommend on the advisor side as well, that plan sponsors do an RFI on the advisor market?
Yes.
For every several years?
Yes, I think it's good to do that, and the time frame to do it is probably every 3 to 5 years. And when you do it, you don't really have to go through, if you feel comfortable with the current advisory relationship and feel like you're getting good service. What you can do is when you state what the purpose of the RFP is, you can state that it's purely a benchmarking exercise, and maybe you don't have to include as many questions as you would if you are truly hiring a new advisor. But again, putting those questions out there will get you a good understanding of what the market has to offer, and you can benchmark your current advisor from that.
Okay. And we have another. What should plan sponsors consider when looking at a fixed fee versus an asset-based fee?
So specifically for a fixed fee versus an asset-based fee, what you want to consider would be the size of your plan. the plan type, and also what specific services you're requesting from the advisor. So those three components create variables about whether or not it's a variable fee or a fixed fee. The good thing with a fixed fee is that it is locked in. Most advisory firms include an annual adjustment for inflation. With an asset-based fee, the thing you want to consider is if your company or your plan is expected to have rapid growth, know that that fee will grow with that. And depending on how you want to control cost or how that fee is paid, that may be something to consider on whether or not you want to do a fixed fee or asset-based fee.
Okay, so there's no real cut and dried answer to that. You really have to examine it and look at your plan closely.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Greg, for an outstanding presentation. It gave us a lot of information to think about. And thank you, audience, for logging into today's webinar. We hope you'll join us for other webinars or at one of our 2014 Midsize Retirement and Healthcare Plan Management Conferences. And again, you can expect to receive information via email from us tomorrow about the webinar recording, about your HRCI credits, and you will also, Greg's going to be setting out his presentation to everyone. So have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.